Harry Houdini could escape anything. He escaped the 17th Ward. He escaped his name. Nobody wanted to see an Eric Weiss escape from a pair of black and white checkered polyester pants, so he slipped into Houdini after bootlegging his way from Hungary, which he called Appleton, Wisconsin. That's how good he was. He was a Hungarian named Eric Weiss who tricked everyone into thinking he was a Houdini from Appleton, Wisconsin. His father was a chowder cook. His mother, a colossal deep sigh of a wave, hello. In school, he could make Jim disappear. He was voted most likely to be first in line, then he was voted most likely to die. At airports, he escaped being staggered. In Russia, he escaped from Siberia and escaped from New York. He escaped from New York with a case of $100 bills. He could escape all kinds of shit just by holding his breath. He could even escape his image in a mirror. That's as good as escaping time. Compared to that, being suspended upside down in a tank filled with managers and electric eels was nothing. He was like a curtain. He was like a pair of dark shades, a mouth of gold teeth. He would regurgitate small keys at parties to impress the chicks. When he had to work in a restaurant, he bussed tables with his thoughts. When he kissed the waitresses, he never moved his lips. Thanks, man. I'll read around in both books, but this is the one jump between the two. And this is a poem called Ode Version that has a Johnny Cash reference in it. And it's my one and perhaps maybe not great attempt at a love poem. And I was challenged in this poem to use the word love as the first line. Ode Version. Love, your jukebox with those iridescent sequins, light stippled reflections like silver bruises. I should know better from goodbye, lingering like a bowl of bar nuts. Had I more than a used bus pass in my pocket, I could catch a ride on Johnny Cash's voice. It's back in black, basso profundo through the late hours all the way to Memphis. And I'd say, I'm sorry. Say, I've learned nothing from our irreducible scenes, me standing there in the wet street, yellow dusted with pollen, you driving away, not towards transcendence, just another city and a struggling box that never looked back. I came here on a hunch, to these flowerings, furious and distracted, to sit among the minor gospels of cigarettes and emptying bottles, to hear the thunder crack of the queue driving home the 8. It reminds me of hunger. Wires swallowed by kudzu, the two of us showered in neon and the city pushed forward like a drink. I remember your fingers stroking the inside of my wrist. Surely, as the past sheds light for new light, as our bodies once blossomed like ashes and our breath resisted every word. I'm going to read this poem for my wife, who is home with our beautiful, horrible children, 5 and 2, and it's a lot easier for me to be here and do this. And this is kind of a playful, goofy poem. Nick noted that I'm actually from Syracuse, New York, but I was raised in New Hampshire. I lived in Madison for 8 years, and when I first moved to Madison, before my wife and I were married, for Byzantine and boring reasons, we had to live in a sublet for 6 weeks. And when we lived in this sublet, we did this weird thing where we put sticky notes on stuff and called it other things. and there's a line in here where the Detroit is pronounced Detroit, and my wife is from Detroit, and people from Detroit hate it when people call Detroit Detroit. This is called Val. We wallpapered the three-legged sack pantry with sticky notes. We stuck those sticky notes inside the broken ham pie warmer and on the ceiling vibrators in the den of fake happenings. We recorded everything. Our China syndromes and Sarasota backslaps, our just enoughs and peachy greens. We turned our sublet into a reflection-seeking yellow trail. When we got bored with the what was, we started making lists. Our first one was called 4 4-word sentences you never want to hear. The first 3 sentences were easy. 1, this ain't no Detroit. 2, put on some Skinner. 3, start the syntactical analysis. But the 4th sentence eluded us like a celestial swan, but then one night my lover had me tied to a post in the big curtain fortress garden. She was interrogating me with the wooden spoons, according to the pamphlet of punishment, with the various oils, peanut, olive, and motor. Whatever you're doing back there, I said, I love it. Pain gunned through my body like an exquisite architecture. The last thing I heard before I blacked out was my lover saying, that's not my finger. Thus, as luck would have it, we completed our list. I'm glad you're laughing because well, this now is a bit of a sad segue, but New Hampshire's poet laureate Walter Butts passed away recently. But I saw him, and he doesn't know that I saw him 20 years ago when I was 21 years old. It was the first poetry reading I went to, and he read these really beautiful, short, aphoristic and funny poems, and people were laughing. And when I was as a 21-year-old who was just thinking about writing poems, I didn't know that that was possible. I didn't know that laughter could happen, that poems could be funny. And I went up to him after, and I said, what a great reading, and do you have any advice? And it was like that Mean Joe Green commercial where he throws the shirt at the kid, and that Coke commercial. Remember the Coke commercial? Who remembers that Coke commercial? So he was like Mean Joe Green, and he gave me some advice. He went, kid, if they're not laughing or crying, you keep revising. It's pretty awesome. Walter Butts. Thank you, Walter Butts. So this is the last poem I'll read from here, and then I'll read a little bit in American Busboy. This poem is called Sistina Aguilera. Christina Aguilera has a blue tongue. That scream you hear when she's dropped in boiling water is actually just steam escaping her shell. She invented the word agnostic in 1869 because she was tired of being called an atheist by Baudelaire and Mallarmé. To wit, she's the only platinum singer who, at room temperature, acts as a liquid. The odds of her being injured by a crowbar are around 13%, but in coal mines, that percentage will rise to a whopping 75%. The word Aguilera means dreams with one eye open, while the word itself tastes like cream, which tastes like apples, which tastes like worms, which tastes like sleep deprived. You cannot fold Christina Aguilera in half more than 7 times, yet in Iceland it is forbidden to keep her as a firearm. Ditto in Siberia and in a Boeing 747 when her wires kink and cannot be straightened by the team of skeptics. Well, this is called the dog leg, which she sings beautifully of in a number of her hit songs, including Dirty, I Got Trouble, What a Girl Wants, The Way You Talk to Me, as well as in her cover version of Word to Your Mother by Sir Vanilla Ice. Aguilera is the longest single-syllable word in English and the only one that rotates on its side and counterclockwise. As the youngest pope ever, 11 years old, she instituted one slot machine per every 8 citizens in Vegas. Contrary to popular rumor, she keeps her heart in her head like a shrimp or a pregnant goldfish. In the Animal Crackers Cookie Zoo, she appears as 15 different shapes, including a herd of blood cells, lightning bolts, and the Nobel Peace Prize. It was said she trapped the wind like a tired man. The Hope radio station in Sweden continually beams her lyrics into space. A bylaw in Utah bans her from unionizing or having sex in a moving ambulance. Or so it would seem on her coat of arms, which reads, "In the beginning was the Word. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled Aguileras yearning to be free." So, when I wrote American Busboy, well, I was a busboy, but I guess that's not really important. I'd never read a book about a kind of work that a lot of people just don't write about, at least not in poetry. So this entire book is in the voice of a busboy. Some of it feels like it's kind of in the real, and some of it drifts into the surreal. But my hope when I wrote it was that the language of the book would be reminiscent of the language that I heard in the restaurant where I worked for 4 years. So if it's a little salty, it's because the busboys were salty. This is called General Attributes. About 1,000 tourists a year will choke on a busboy, according to the statistics. There's this mysterious waitress triangle where your service disappears. There's this famous grilled cheese where the busboy's face emblazons, spontaneous in the buttery heat. The origins of the word are iffy at best. It could mean nowhere in sight, or stealing your tips, or seeker of the waitress panties. Your mother was a busboy. Jesus was a busboy. And there have always been two kinds, the ones who distract you while you pay your bill, and the ones who find your car out in the lot and chew the rubber strips from its windows. I thought if you were a busboy, your future was ominous as a motel at dusk. Then I read the legend where food service workers battle the economy's giant squid to a draw. Then I became a busboy and married a waitress, just like in the opera. Sorry, I had it. I did. I'm going to do 2 more. This is called Human Resources. Finally, the copier just jigsawed and Swiss cheesed and otherwise minced and shredded the new menu specials to stubble mulched lettuce. Something had to be done. A waitress distracted the copier with a lobster while I dialed the emergency number and whispered the secret word. When I hung up, the SWAT team was already there, rappelling in a shadowy flux from the roof. The copier sensed something was up. It drooled ink and toner from its face, its digital readout, reading in tongues, flashing a seizure of stop and go. "Debbie," I said, if that was even the waitress's name, "take my hand." Then the SWAT team swung through the windows like axes, swift through the haze with their laser scopes trained. They outflanked that copier quick, had it blindfolded and unplugged. The restaurant's CO lit a cigar while two boys in back went to work with some pipes. The CO shook his head. He had a grim expression. He said, "We've seen this type of copier before." This last poem is called National Flag Week. This book takes place over the course of the summer, and all the titles take their names from apparently actual holidays. And the inspiration for this poem, I'm really lucky. I've been able to teach for the last 15 years, and people will sometimes ask how I got to be a teacher. It might be an interesting story. And it made me remember that when I bussed tables, nobody ever said, "Wow, that's really interesting. How did you become a busboy?" So this poem takes as its inspiration that idea. It turns up later. National Flag Week. When the hostess comes out to apologize for the overfried clams, she's doing her job, apologizing for disappointing fried clams, apologizing for fried clams that have underachieved, apologizing for fried clams that have lost their sense of purpose. It was determined the cheese slices stuck to the ceiling must have had their reasons. Generally, as they prepped your food, the cooks would be listening unironically to the 80s speed metal. The locker room where socks went to die. The lobster tank where now and then a lobster tried to escape, but the others would drag him back. This isn't about the flawed democracy of lobster tanks, the sweaty dictatorship of managers at the bars with toothpicks in their mouths saying things like, "You missed a spot," or the unacceptable conditions the green dumpsters worked under, wheezing blue fluid to the bay, where the tourist attractions were tourists who were attractions thanks to their shitty parallel parking skills. The new rich estates along the shore looked like cheap estates, trying to look like old rich estates. On the bulletin board in English and Spanish were directions for what to do if someone was choking. If you were choking in another language, too bad for you. Still, there were times bussing tables when I felt strangely free. Yet no one asks how I came to be a busboy. It was the same way anyone becomes a busboy. Someone on the inside vouched for my character.